Hi, I'm Jonathan Forrence. I am a third-year grad here at University of Kentucky, and I thought I would start out with a bit of a story. It was about this time, 2 years ago, that I went to a professor's house with the other grads, and that professor asked if what we were most proud of. And then the next thing I know, it was almost my time to say something. And I thought I might say something about this large scale work that I had just built in Kentucky, not in Kentucky, and New York, that took a whole bunch of time and was this thing that I was like super proud that I had accomplished. Or maybe I would say something about skiing, which I've done a fair amount of and I've been relatively proud of, or perhaps something about climbing. Instead, what popped out of my mouth in that moment of like absolute panic happens right before you're supposed to answer a question was, I was really proud to survive having grown up on an orchard. Now, I come from a seventh generation of farmers, and I'm the shaggy one that's all the way at the bottom, in case you can't tell. And from a very early age, we were told that we were going to be farmers. If we go to the top right, that's me and my brother and my father's idea of childcare, which was putting us in bolt bins and then putting the bolt bin on the back of a truck and driving us around, which neither of us were like able to figure out. Oh, you just climb out of it. We were like, oh yeah, this is like a playpen. But I thought that was an interesting segue because it must have put something in my brain, and I ruminated about that answer for the next semester and a half or so, where I just created one work after another, and everyone was like, you need to be a little bit more honest. And that led me to creating this work. And I think this particular work is the start point of my introducing agricultural themes to my work. And it's also the very literal narrative of my endpoint of being a farmer. And at the age of 22, I was in the field. It was cold. It was December. It was like 15 degrees. And we were pruning. And I just had enough. And I got off my ladder and I yelled 2 rows over to my father. I was like, Mac, I quit. I got in my car. I drove to Colorado, where I became a ski instructor for the next 2 years. But I think in this work, that story, that exemplification of labor done versus labor that I was absent for, and that I no longer was present in a heritage, is left in these boots and this picker's ladder, which we'll talk about here in a second, and this tree that just is growing from the wall, and this kind of segments of trees, the labor done, the tree that has been pruned that kind of lays across the ground in the background. There's just an inkling of it in the photo. You don't need that much of it. And that was just my intro to this body of work, which was also my exit, very literally, from that life. And so when casting about for things that symbolized that labor, that industrial practice of modern agriculture on a orchard, the one thing that really comes to mind that really stands out isn't necessarily the tractor or the combine or any of that fancy gear, because that's not anything I ever experienced. No. What comes to mind is these pickers ladders. And we can see here from a photo that I was able to pull from the Delaware Public Archive that they've been used for a long time. They were used up until 2017 when OSHA finally, like, I don't know where OSHA was up until that point, but OSHA was like, no, you can't use those. You need to have a third leg. And it's really this beautiful object that is about, it's designed with this long tong at the end that you can kind of slide up into the crook of any tree branch. And you kind of make this little tripod where you're trusting the tree, and yet you're also relying on some skill of your ladder placement. And it's about this very delicate balance because you don't want to knock any ripe fruit off, because the minute that grade A fruit hits the ground, it's over. Like, that's no longer grade A fruit. So you've lost that fruit forever. And so it's this very gentle, but very industrialized and specifiedly perfect item. And so I started examining the pathways of access that item opened, that ladder opened. And I started to take the tong, which is the most unique part of that item, and build that and disassemble it and kind of stick two tongs together, and thinking about this balancing act of this relationship that I had to the farm and this path that my father had hoped for me, this access. You know, he had seen his future crumble into, you know, wanting to be a vet, into being sucked back into the farm. And I had left that heritage. I had broken it. And yet I needed to have this balancing act of this relationship with this farm and these people, and come to terms with my own action of leaving. And because it is such an industrial item, I thought that my next step in this course or progression of building ladders would be to take it to an industrial material. Let's like make it real big. And so I, of course, moved to making it in steel. And this steel ladder kind of grows from its, I don't know, planter or base up into a knot around this ball of dirt. And it kind of is showing the tie that I have to the land, but also exemplifying or showing the guilt that I have. And as I started to go down this road, I thought, well, I'm in Kentucky, and so I'm surrounded by farmers, so I should go talk to them. And what I've discovered is this is not a phenomenon that's unique to me in any way. There is many children of farmlet hands that are leaving, and that this is actually a segue moment in America. I mean, we've been industrializing this practice for so long. It's not uncommon to think, oh yeah, it's logical that farmers are leaving. But because we're industrializing it, what does that mean for rural areas and that mark or that establishment of farming communities? And so I think there's a lot of power in the gesture of a knot and bringing earth up. And so that leads me into things that are new for me. And over quarantine, of course, I didn't have access to a giant steel shop. And I didn't have access to a table saw, so I couldn't make wooden ladders, and I couldn't make giant steel ladders. And so I started thinking about, what can I do? And I started casting plaster in these long troughs. And I started using a variety, or I'm in the process of using a variety of tools to capture the mark making into the land and then show that positive. And I think that will exemplify and capture these various types of these labors that go into the cultivation of land that we forget. And might be important to document. Anyway, that about wraps it up. So thanks.